How my love of whiskey saved my family life. Some men say they owe their lives to luck. Others say it was their instincts, their faith, or their own strength that saved them from disaster. Me? I owe everything to whiskey. It was the last Friday of the month, which meant one thing: drinks with Matt. For the past 6 years, Henry's Bar and Grill had been our place. The same booth in the corner, the same bartender who already knew our orders. We had a routine: grab a drink, talk about work, complain about getting older, and pretend we weren't becoming our fathers. Only tonight, I was sitting at our booth alone. Matt was late. Really late. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he got caught up at work. Maybe there was traffic. It wasn't like him, but things happened. Then, at 8 o'clock, I texted him. No response. At 8:30, I called. Straight to voicemail. At 9 o'clock, I ordered another drink, checked my phone again, and tried not to feel uneasy. Matt was never late. If he couldn't make it, he would say something. The guy once called me from a hospital bed just to let me know he'd have to cancel because of a broken wrist. That's how reliable he was. So where he? I leaned back in the booth, staring at my phone, debating whether to call again when it buzzed in my hand. Emily. I frowned. My wife rarely called me when I was out. Hey, babe, she said when I answered. Still out with Matt? I glanced at my half-empty glass. He never showed. A pause. A second too long. Oh, she said lightly, too lightly. That's weird. Yeah, I muttered. I texted him. No answer. Maybe he got caught up in something, she suggested. Her voice was calm, almost casual. But something about it didn't sit right with me. Emily and I had been married for 8 years, and not once had she ever checked in like this. If anything, she enjoyed her alone time when I was out. She'd watch one of her guilty pleasure reality shows, take a long bath, or curl up with a book. So why was she calling me now? I let the silence stretch between us, waiting to see if she'd fill it. She didn't. You okay? I asked. She let out a soft laugh. Yeah, I just wanted to see if you were having fun. That's when I knew something was off. Emily never called to check in. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about something else. I didn't push. Not yet. Yeah, I said finally. I'll probably head home soon. Okay, she said, and I could almost hear the relief in her voice. See you soon. The call ended, but I kept my phone in my hand, staring at the screen. Something wasn't right. And I was about to find out exactly why. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I walked. It was cold for a spring night, and the streets were alive, the usual Friday night chaos of taxis honking, couples laughing, and groups of friends pouring in and out of bars. But I barely noticed. My mind was somewhere else, stuck on the uneasy feeling in my gut. I wasn't the paranoid type. I never had been. Emily had never given me a reason to doubt her. If she said she was going out with friends, I believed her. If she had to work late, I trusted it was really about work. We weren't one of those couples who checked each other's phones or tracked each other's locations. But tonight felt different. Matt was missing. Emily called me out of nowhere. And something deep in my gut was telling me that these two things were connected. I shook the thought away, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe Matt really did just get caught up at work. Maybe Emily was just being sweet. But if that were true, why did I feel like I was walking toward the beginning of the end? When I finally got home, the house looked normal. Emily's car was parked in the same spot. The downstairs lights were still on. From the outside, it was just another Friday night. But as soon as I walked inside, I knew something was off. It was too quiet. Normally, Emily would be curled up on the couch, a show playing in the background, maybe a candle burning. But tonight, there was nothing, no TV, no music, no sound at all. Emily? I called. No answer. I set my keys down on the counter, my fingers tapping against the wood. My eyes flicked toward the hallway. The bedroom door was shut. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. I was being paranoid. There was nothing going on. And yet, instead of heading upstairs, I turned toward the whiskey cabinet. I needed a drink. I opened the glass doors, scanning the shelves, and my eyes landed on the bottle. The Glendronach 25-year-old. It was the rarest in my collection, the one I had never opened. Aged to perfection, rich in history. I had been saving it for something special. Maybe tonight was special enough. I reached for it, pulled out the cork, and poured a small amount into a glass. I brought it to my nose. And froze. Something was wrong. I swirled the liquid, examining the color. It was close, but not quite right. I took a slow sip. And that's when I knew. It wasn't my whiskey. It was cheaper. Sharper. A substitute. Someone had poured something else into the bottle. I stared at the glass, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Emily was upstairs. Matt had disappeared. And now, the one thing I knew better than anything in this world had been tampered with. This wasn't just about whiskey. This was proof. I just didn't know of what yet. I sat there, staring at the glass in my hand, my fingers wrapped so tightly around it that I thought it might crack. This wasn't my whiskey. I knew it the second it hit my tongue. The depth wasn't there, the finish was too harsh, the balance was all wrong. It was close, but not close enough. I looked at the bottle, the 25-year-old Glendronach I had spent years waiting to open. It was still mostly full. Someone had tried to cover their tracks. I wasn't some casual drinker who couldn't tell the difference between a fine whiskey and a cheap one. I had spent years curating my collection, learning the notes, the finishes, the delicate flavors. I could smell a fraud before even taking a sip. So the question wasn't if this bottle had been tampered with. The question was who did it and why. I set the glass down carefully, swallowing the slow burn of suspicion rising in my throat. I had walked into this house thinking I was just being paranoid. Now, I wasn't so sure. I turned, listening to the house. The quiet hum of the fridge, the faint creak of wood settling, but nothing else. Emily still hadn't come downstairs. I glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door was still shut. I exhaled slowly, forcing my pulse to steady. Think, Matt. Don't jump to conclusions. This could be nothing. Maybe Emily had a guest over recently, someone who didn't know what they were drinking. Maybe she had opened the bottle, realized how expensive it was, and panicked, trying to refill it with something similar. But Emily knew how much I cared about my whiskey collection. And she wasn't the type to lie about it. I tapped my fingers against the counter, my eyes flicking between the bottle and the hallway. I needed answers. And there was only one way to get them. I made my way toward the bedroom, my footsteps slow and deliberate. As I reached the door, I hesitated for half a second before turning the knob. The door swung open. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hair damp from a shower, wearing an old college sweatshirt and shorts. She looked up, startled. "Hey," she said, blinking. "You're home early." I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "Matt never showed," I said. Something flickered across her face, something small, but I caught it. "He didn't," she said, shifting slightly. "That's weird." "Yeah," I said slowly. "We had plans all week. And he's not answering his phone." She nodded, running a hand through her damp hair. "Maybe his battery died?" "Maybe. Or maybe he was never planning to meet me in the first place." I let the silence stretch between us for a moment, then exhaled and walked further into the room, keeping my voice casual. "I opened the Glendronach," I said. Emily's head snapped up. It was subtle, but I saw it. That brief flash of something in her eyes. Surprise? Panic? "Oh," she said after a beat. I thought you were saving that for something special. I sat down on the chair in the corner of the room, watching her closely. I was. I paused, letting the words settle. But when I tasted it, something felt off. Emily's hand twitched in her lap. She tried to mask it, but I saw the shift in her expression. Off, she echoed. Yeah, I said, tapping my fingers against the armrest. Like it wasn't the same whiskey I bought. She gave a light laugh, shaking her head. Mark, that bottle has been sitting there for years. Maybe your memory of the taste is just. It's not my memory, I cut in. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. I know whiskey, Emily. That bottle was switched. The room felt smaller suddenly. Emily looked down at the bedspread, running a hand over the fabric. Maybe someone else drank from it, Anne. I didn't blink. Who? She hesitated. Just for a second. And that second was everything. My stomach twisted. She wasn't confused by my question. She was deciding how to answer it. I leaned forward slightly, my elbows resting on my knees. Emily, I said quietly. Who drank from my bottle? Her lips parted. Then closed. She knew she was trapped. I could feel it in the air between us, the slow unraveling of a carefully kept lie. She cleared her throat, forcing a small smile. I had some friends over last week while you were at work. Maybe one of them. Which friends? I interrupted. She blinked. Stacy. Anne? Jen? I stared at her. Emily was a terrible liar. If she had really had friends over, she wouldn't have hesitated. She wouldn't have needed to think about who was here. She was scrambling. And she was doing a terrible job at it. I exhaled, standing up. Okay, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I'll ask them about it. Her eyes widened slightly. What? I'll text Stacy and Jen. Ask if they remember drinking it. Maybe they can tell me what happened. Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. I could see it now, the sheer panic settling behind her eyes. She knew I had her. And I knew, at that moment, that whatever she was trying to cover up, it had nothing to do with Stacy or Jen. I turned, walking toward the door. Mark, wait. I didn't stop. I walked straight to my phone, picked it up, and opened Find My iPhone. Matt and I had shared locations years ago after he got lost on a hiking trip. I never had a reason to check it before. But now? Now I did. I typed in his name, waiting for the screen to load. Matt wasn't at work. He wasn't at home. He was at my apartment. A cold numbness spread through my chest as I stared at the screen. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the beginning of the end. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen as if the location pin would change if I just waited long enough. Matt was at my apartment. Not at his place. Not at a bar. Not anywhere else he should be on a Friday night. I exhaled slowly, rolling my tongue over my teeth, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. Maybe he had stopped by to drop something off. Maybe he needed to borrow something. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why my best friend had been in my home while I wasn't there. Except, there wasn't. And deep down, I already knew it. I could feel it in my chest, a slow, suffocating pressure that made my pulse hammer in my ears. Emily was still sitting on the bed when I walked back into the room. She looked up quickly, trying to keep her expression neutral, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled into the fabric of her sweatshirt. You're checking your phone a lot tonight, she said lightly. I ignored her. Instead, I sat back down in the chair across from her, elbows resting on my knees, phone still in my hand. Matt's at our apartment, I said, my voice calm. Emily didn't move. Didn't blink. For a moment, she didn't even breathe. Then, too slowly, too controlled, she let out a short laugh. What? He's at our apartment, I repeated. Right now. Her lips parted. Then closed. I saw it, the way her throat bobbed, the way she hesitated just a second too long before answering. That's weird, she said, forcing a small smile. Maybe he left something here last time he was over. When was the last time he was over? Silence. I stared at her, waiting. She licked her lips. I think, last weekend? Lies. Matt hadn't been over in months. And we both knew it. The weight of it all was pressing in now. The fake whiskey. The phone call at the bar. The hesitation in her voice. The way she couldn't even come up with a decent excuse for why Matt, my best friend, was at our home without me there. I could almost hear it now. Their voices. Their laughter. The sound of my own home being used for something else entirely. I felt something deep in my chest snap. I stood up so suddenly that Emily flinched. Where are you going? She asked, her voice carefully measured. I'm going to see him. She stood up now, panic flashing across her face. Wait, don't. Don't what? I turned to face her, my own voice eerily calm. She froze, lips parting, eyes flicking back and forth between mine like she was searching for the right thing to say. Like she was trying to find a way out. I tilted my head slightly. Tell me, Emily, I said. Why don't you want me to go? She swallowed hard. I just think you're overreacting, she said finally. I let out a slow breath, nodding to myself. There it was. The final nail. Instead, I walked toward the closet, grabbed my jacket, and pulled it on. Matt. Matt was inside. For a moment, none of us moved. Matt was hunched between my coats, his face frozen in shock, his body stiff like a deer caught in headlights. Emily gasped behind me, her hand flying to her mouth. I just stared. I had thought of 100 different ways this night might go. But this? This wasn't even on the list. I took a slow step back, my breath steady, my hands at my sides. I wasn't sure if I was going to touch him or laugh. Matt, I said, my voice eerily calm. Why are you in my closet? Matt didn't answer right away. He didn't move at all. It was like he was waiting for the right words to magically appear in his mouth. Emily took a shaky breath behind me. Babe, I can explain. I held up a hand. Don't. She went silent. Matt swallowed hard. Look, man, I can explain, he started. I tilted my head, waiting. But he didn't say anything else. Because there was nothing he could say. I exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of my nose. This was surreal. I had felt something was off. I had even suspected Matt was lying to me. But I had expected some dumb excuse, some half-assed lie, not this. I dropped my hand and looked him in the eye. You were in my apartment when I wasn't home, I said, my voice measured. Drinking my whiskey. And when I walked in, you hid in the closet. Matt's mouth opened. Then closed. Tell me, I said, taking another slow step toward him. What am I supposed to think right now? Emily finally found her voice. He just came over to talk, Mark, she blurted. That's all. You're making this into something it's not. I turned, staring at her. She flinched under my gaze. Is that right? I asked. So when exactly was I supposed to find out about this little hangout? Emily swallowed. And why was he hiding in the closet, Emily? I cut in, my voice sharper now. She had no answer. Because there was no answer that made sense. Matt finally stepped out of the closet, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man, I didn't want it to seem weird, he said. When you got home, I panicked, okay? It's not what you think. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because this was pathetic. Oh, really? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is. Matt's face twisted into guilt. And Emily? She looked down. She couldn't even meet my eyes anymore. I clenched my jaw, stepping past Matt and pacing toward the window. I needed to breathe. To think. This was worse than I had imagined. Not just the betrayal. The sheer stupidity of it. They were drinking whiskey in my home. Using my space like it belonged to them. And when I walked in? Matt hid in the closet. If that wasn't proof, I didn't know what was. I turned back to face them, my voice dead calm. How long? Emily's head snapped up. Mark. How long? I repeated. Matt opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't even try to lie to me. I'm past that now. Emily's bottom lip trembled. Then she finally muttered something so low I almost didn't hear it. A few months. Something snapped inside me. Months. Not a one-time mistake. Not a moment of weakness. A pattern. A decision. My best friend. My wife. I let out a slow breath, my hands flexing at my sides. Wow, I muttered. You two really did this to me. Matt shifted awkwardly. Mark, man, I cut him off. Get out. Matt hesitated. Listen, just get out. This time, my voice was sharper. Final. Matt swallowed hard. He hesitated, looking at Emily like she might somehow fix this for him. But she was staring at the floor. And I was staring at the man who used to be my best friend. His shoulders dropped. And then, without another word, he walked out. I followed him to the door, watching him step into the hallway. Just before he left, he turned back. I never wanted to hurt you, man, he muttered. I slammed the door in his face. When I turned back around, Emily was standing there, tears pooling in her eyes. Mark, please, she whispered. Can we just? I pulled my wedding ring off my finger. Her breath hitched. I tossed it onto the counter. I don't want to hear it, Emily, I said. I just want you gone. She let out a quiet sob. Mark, please, I stepped past her, walking toward the bedroom door. Her voice broke behind me. Mark, don't do this. Don't. I shut the door. And locked it. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city beyond the bedroom window. Emily was still in the apartment. I could hear her shifting on the couch, occasionally sniffling, like she had the right to cry over this. Like she was the one who had been betrayed. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel much of anything. But that was temporary. I knew that once the numbness wore off, the weight of everything would hit me. The betrayal. The stupidity of it all. The fact that Matt and Emily had looked me in the eye for months and pretended nothing was wrong. When that feeling came, I wasn't going to fight it. I was going to use it. Because I wasn't just going to walk away from this quietly. I was going to make them regret it. Step 1, take away her comfort. At exactly 5:45 a.m., I got out of bed. Emily was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, curled up like she had spent the night in misery. I almost laughed. She thought this was misery? She had no idea what was coming. I grabbed my laptop from the desk, sat down at the kitchen table, and started shutting everything down. First, the utilities. I pulled up my electric company account and scheduled a service disconnection. Water? Cancelled. Gas? Turned off. Then I moved on to subscriptions. The Wi-Fi, which was in my name. Gone. Netflix? Hulu? Spotify? All cancelled. Even the grocery delivery app we used? Deleted. I worked efficiently, my fingers moving over the keyboard without hesitation. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about erasing myself from Emily's life as quickly as possible. By the time she woke up, everything would be different. By 8 a.m., Emily finally stirred. I heard the rustling of blankets, the soft creak of the couch, then the shuffle of bare feet as she walked into the kitchen. She froze when she saw me sitting there, my coffee mug in hand, my laptop open. She looked exhausted. Puffy eyes, tangled hair, like she had been tossing and turning all night. Mark. Her voice was hoarse. I took a sip of my coffee. Morning. She swallowed, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Can we talk? I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. Talk? She nodded quickly. I just want to explain. I let out a short laugh, setting my coffee mug down on the table. Explain? She flinched at the sharpness in my voice. Emily, I said, folding my arms. I found Matt hiding in my closet. Her lips parted, but no words came out. You don't need to explain, I continued. I already know everything. She let out a slow, shaky breath. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. I stared at her. Wasn't supposed to happen like this? That got a bitter chuckle out of me. I stood up, stretching my arms slightly. So tell me, Emily, I said, my voice mocking. How exactly was this supposed to happen? She didn't have an answer. Step 2, expose them. By 9:30 a.m., I was done listening to her excuses. She had cried. Begged. Sworn that she still loved me, that she never meant for this to happen. I didn't care. I opened my phone, pulled up our group chat, and started typing. Just so everyone knows, Emily and Matt have been sneaking around behind my back for months. I won't be at any events where they're invited. Do whatever you want with that information. I hovered over the send button for half a second. Then I pressed it. One by one, messages started rolling in. What? This is real? Are you serious? And then? People started removing Emily and Matt from the chat. By the time I refreshed, their names were gone. Emily's phone buzzed furiously from the couch, but she didn't touch it. She just stood there, staring at me. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. I smiled. Yeah, I did. Step 3, destroy Matt's career. By noon, I had one last thing to take care of. Matt had spent the last 10 years working his way up in high-end real estate. He had built a perfect reputation, the charming, trustworthy agent who made his clients feel safe. That reputation was about to go up in flames. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and drove straight to his office. I walked in, manila envelope in hand, and asked to speak with his boss. She greeted me in the conference room, giving me a polite smile. What can I do for you? I slid the envelope across the table. She frowned slightly but opened it. Her expression changed immediately. Screenshots. Receipts. Proof of everything. Your top agent, I said casually, isn't as reliable as he pretends to be. She stared at the photos for a long time. Then she closed the folder, exhaling sharply. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, she said, her voice clipped. We'll handle it from here. I smiled. I'm sure you will. I disclosed to the management his manipulations with the accounting records when renting out apartments. By the time I got home, Matt's company website had removed his name. Step 4, make sure she leaves. At 4 p.m., I walked back into the apartment and tossed a trash bag onto the floor. Emily looked up from the couch, startled. What's that? She asked. I crossed my arms. Your deadline. She swallowed. Deadline for what? For getting the hell out, I said flatly. You have until tomorrow. After that, I start throwing your things onto the street. Tears welled in her eyes. Mark, please. I cut her off. Pack your bags, Emily, I said, walking past her. I'm done looking at you. By the next morning, she was gone. She must have known I was serious, because when I came back to the apartment at 11:45 a.m., the place was half empty. I didn't check the note she left on the counter. I didn't watch her leave. I just stood there, staring at the quiet, empty apartment. And for the first time in months, I felt free. For the first few days after Emily left, the apartment felt too quiet. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Just empty. No faint hum of the shower in the morning. No sound of her walking across the hardwood floors, complaining about the cold. No soft murmur of her voice as she talked on the phone with her mom. It wasn't like I missed her. Not after what she had done. But I had spent 8 years with her. Even when she wasn't in the room, her presence had always been there. And now, for the first time in almost a decade, I was completely alone. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I threw myself into work. Arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for projects I normally wouldn't touch. Anything to keep my mind occupied. It worked, for the most part. The office was loud, full of people, full of distractions. I could spend 10, 12, 14 hours at my desk and not have to think about Emily or Matt. But then I'd go home. And the silence would be waiting for me. I tried watching TV, but nothing held my attention. I tried reading, but my mind wandered after a few pages. I tried going to the gym, but lifting weights didn't make me feel anything. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Not just the betrayal, but all the little moments before it. The times I ignored my gut feeling. The times Emily had been a little too distant, a little too defensive, a little too secretive. How many chances had I given her to tell the truth? How many times had I looked Matt in the eye, never once suspecting the knife he was about to stick in my back? The anger didn't come all at once. It built slowly. Like pressure under a lid, waiting for the right moment to explode. It had been 3 days when Emily finally called. I was sitting in my new apartment, staring at my phone, watching her name flash on the screen. I knew she would reach out eventually. She couldn't help herself. I let it ring a few times before answering. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She exhaled shakily. Mark, can we talk? I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head. We are talking. Silence. I could hear the hesitation in her breathing, the way she was choosing her words carefully. She let out a breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I took a slow sip of my drink. Okay. She hesitated. That's it? What do you want me to say, Emily? I asked, my voice calm. That it's fine? That I forgive you? She sniffled. I don't know. I miss you. I actually laughed at that. A low, bitter chuckle. No, you don't, I said simply. You miss having me as a backup plan. Her breath hitched. That's not true. It is, I said. And that's why I'm not angry anymore. Because I see you clearly now. She let out a slow, shaky breath. I was wrong, she whispered. I know that now. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I said. You do. But it's too late. She sniffed again, like she was trying not to cry. So that's it? We're just done? I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Then I said the last words I would ever say to my wife. We were done the moment I opened that closet, Emily. And then I hung up. And never spoke to her again. Rebuilding took time. A lot of time. At first, I thought moving on would be easy. That the satisfaction of knowing I had destroyed them both would be enough. But revenge doesn't heal you. It just clears the path for you to figure out who you are without them. and I had no idea who I was. I started small. Signed up for a cooking class, because Emily had always been the one who cooked. Went on road trips alone, because I had spent years adjusting my plans to fit her schedule. Reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in ages because I had been too busy with my perfect little married life. And slowly, things started to feel normal again. One night, months later, I was at a bar with some coworkers when someone asked me, "Are you seeing anyone?" I expected the question to sting. To remind me of everything I had lost. But instead, I just shrugged. "Nah," I said, taking a sip of my drink. "I'm good." And for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. Matt never called me. I figured he wouldn't. He lost everything, his job, his reputation, his friends, even Emily. Last I heard, he had moved to a new city, trying to start over where people wouldn't know what he did. Emily? She faded into the background. I never blocked her on social media, so I saw the occasional update. New apartment. New life. But not a happy one. And me? I walked away clean. Because in the end, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to watch them destroy themselves. And that was satisfying enough.